CTPM. Nowadays, CTPM has become really so well known, so used, that it's now in the land of overuse and abuse. People start now developing, software that will slice and dice content that is worth. Let's say you want to do a website, but a bad website on Anguilla. You'll do a search on the Caribbean island of Anguilla. You'll take the first 4 or 5 sites. You'll feed it into the software that slices and dices content, turns out ridiculous pages, build some fake links in from free hosting places like blogger.com or hub pages, or there's a bunch of them that have become basically blogger heaven. And hopefully, if you do hundreds of these little mini sites, a few of them may score in the top 10 and may make you a few dollars. I can't imagine anything more soul-destroying, more depressing than, it's not a business, because sooner or later, Google has already discovered parts of it and will ultimately crush it completely. And for all that work, because it is work, it's kind of like going back to heat. Why spend all the time and energy on something that ultimately is going to get destroyed, get you put into Google jail, when you could be doing it properly, building a real business that has real equity, that ultimately people like my daughter with her website about Anguilla, she could sell that to companies here in Anguilla or Caribbean tourism companies for at least a couple $100,000 because of the traffic, not because of the income she generates, because they could develop much more income because of their larger reach, but she has a unique property. She has thousands of visitors a day who love her website and who monetize through, now she puts on her own advertising, she has Google AdSense, she sells some hard goods. She could, if she wanted, live here in Anguilla and build a tour company and make a great deal of money hiring people, training them, and doing tours for tourists, because she's probably the most well-known person on this little island of Anguilla amongst tourists. So she's done that. She's built that trust and recognition by delivering great content, by knowing her area. People focus on a lot of different areas. Get, this logo, the Better Business Bureau online, and this and that. Nothing speaks better than somebody who writes content that other people with an interest in it recognize as being great. And the funny thing is, the average person can do that. What they can't do is figure out search engines, is worry about CSS, is master all the various complicated stuff, or tedious. The brainstorming, keyword, and all that type of research that has to be done up front. If you don't show people really how to think about this properly, they will end up with the weirdest site concepts if they're even thinking about CTPM. Give them the correct process with tools, all of a sudden, these people are able to operate at an extremely high level. Because once you free them up to write about what they know, we even have one of the roadblocks is even the majority of people can't write very well. And so one of the most common complaints was, I can't write. Even if I could do this, I can't write. And you go, well, how ridiculous is that? Of course people can write. They can talk. They go into their boss and they ask for a raise. They're perceived as having a certain type of personality by the way they communicate with friends. They're constantly negotiating with spouses and children on a variety of family-type issues, but it boils down to negotiating and communicating. And suddenly you're in front of a keyboard and you can't write. It's nonsense. So we put out a book, and you can get it for free at nycps.sitesale.com. You can download that book, and it's very simple. It just simply destroys this myth that you can't write. Yes, you can't write to be Hemingway, but this is not about being Hemingway. This is about communicating something that you know already, communicating at a very simple, easy-to-read, grade 7 or grade 8 level, and getting your personality into that writing so that people understand and feel who you are. Anybody can write to that level. And yet, curiously, people somehow think that they can't communicate. So it's been an interesting exercise of just constantly knocking down the roadblocks. NYCPS is a great low-tech example. Creating site maps automatically. Content 2.0 that we just launched. Those are high-tech examples. Web 2.0 that you alluded to earlier. That's obviously and now a major and important future of the web. For those who don't know, it can be summarized into basically your visitors create content for you in a way that spreads virally. In a nutshell, that's what Web 2.0 is. Amazon was probably the first company to do that with their reviews. It wasn't true Web 2.0, many will argue, in that it wasn't viral and so forth. But in terms of users creating content for you, that was the beginning of that concept. Then you look at some of the other examples, more like Twitter. I mean, Twitter doesn't create content. Users create 100% of that content. Facebook, YouTube, and you can go on, whether it's videos, whether it's, Facebook basically, the first thing you're uploading is yourself. This is who I am. And after that, the platform is there for social interaction. A great next use after searching the internet for information has become social interaction. How much value that has for the average small business person when you only have X number of hours is a completely different thing. And that's part of, again, our job is sorting this out, turning into a module called socializing it, giving you some ideas for how to use Twitter to niche Twitter in time and cost-effective manners, but not to go overboard. The focus of a small business is still its website. But now with Web 2.0, get your visitors involved. Get them to tell you what you missed about Anguilla or how I propagate this particular cactus. Create all kinds of, you can create like versions of Yahoo Answers. There's just an infinite number of things you can do with this. And we launched this 2 years ago internally to SBIers, selling it as a separate add-on module. It became so successful, SBIers literally tripled and quadrupled what was already very good traffic, that we simply bit the bullet and said, this needs to be, up until now, Seiko has always been all-in-one. This module surpassed our expectations and became part of SBI, which is what we call SBI 2.0. And it is the first true Web 2.0 platform for your small business person. Up until now, Web 2.0 has been well-financed, venture capital-driven companies that had an idea, like Twitter. Before Facebook, there was MySpace. Before MySpace, there was Friendster. Facebook finally got the recipe correct. But these all went through tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to build a platform to enable visitors to come on and create their content for them, which is what builds their traffic, which ultimately some of them have yet to prove a model that they can actually make money with this. But with a theme-based content site, which is what SBI builds, you are now getting your visitors to build more and more content for you. You get found for more and more keywords, long-tail keywords, which are those rare keywords of which there are, for a site like Anguilla, you might know 10 keywords. In fact, there's over 40 or 50,000 keywords for which you could get found for Anguilla. That builds up not only a ton more traffic, it's stable traffic. If suddenly your most important keyword isn't in the top 10, and maybe your ego cares, but your pocketbook doesn't. Because by now, the vast majority of the traffic is coming from very stable, long-tail, Tier 2 or Tier 3 traffic, and you have such a presence, so many inbound links to go with that traffic, to go with those content, that you really build a site that's becoming invulnerable to incursion by larger companies.